All right, hey guys, real quick, I wanted to touch on something. I talk about this a whole lot. I probably have a ton of context on it, but just to update the video, so to speak, I want to talk about how my biggest goal, not my biggest goal, but my biggest encouragement when looking at arm action mechanics, and everyone looks at like, oh, well, long arm or like short arm and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, I won't even dive into that. But for me, when looking at the arm action mechanics, we look at the goal of like the underlying goal of pitching, right? And throwing a baseball and having different pitches and all this stuff. It's to get into your release point or your release slot as consistent and as repeatable as possible, right? That is going to give us a plethora of really solid attributes, not even to just mention the consistency of your command, right? But a lot of really good attributes. So when I look at like, okay, well then if that's a huge goal and that's a huge piece to pitching and arm action, then how to best accomplish that goal. And that's where I come into the equation with the hand path simplicity and hand path connectivity. Because if you simplify the path in which your hands, and a lot of people refer to just, you know, your arm action, I look at arm as just a very large, you know, piece. So when I look at simplification, or I look at the one thing that throws the baseball, I'm specifying the hand, and you can generally have an idea of where your hands are through space. When you think about your arm, is like, all right, is my shoulder, is my forearm, is my elbow, is my bicep, is my pinky. So hand path connectivity, hand path simplicity, because again, look at the goal, repeatability and consistent, right, in your slot. So if that's the goal, then the best way to go about that, in my opinion, is to simplify the path in which your hands take up until the point in which your arm is leveraged into your slot. Because if you have, and this is not to say that a long arm path is bad, or a massive amount of trunk counter rotation is bad because your arm dips out, or even like taking another step and looking at like hand, you know, Little League mechanics, hand pointing back to second, or the arm out on time, all these things. Not to say that's bad or it's good. Obviously, it's individual dependent. No one throws the baseball like anyone else, or same as anyone else. But when we look at, you know, people that have multiple checkpoints, essentially multiple points to get to until the point of which they anchor, because again, I talk about this a lot, nothing really happens within the upper body mechanics until the lower body mechanics are completely concluded, completely finished, right? Last part of the lower body mechanics is the block, and as soon as that block is done, now the upper body mechanics initiate. So you don't want to put yourself in a suboptimal position within your upper body, because you're essentially trying to do too much and you're trying to be too cognitive of like things that are occurring up here. All right, and the same thing goes for the consistency and the repeatability if you have multiple checkpoints to get to. Obviously, a lot of people watching this have been in a game and know the game environments. Things tend to speed up. So when you look at like the game speeding up, you can see that maybe a guy's delivery is going faster, but their hand and their arm action are going at the same tempo. So then you have a total disconnect of tempo, and you have a disconnect of slots, and especially, you know, with that in mind, those guys that have multiple checkpoints to go to, because again, I'm biased with all this. I used to be a guy that would dip, come out, full elbow extension, come wrap around and come here, and I realized that I was not repeatable. I was not consistent with my command. I would have good days, I would have bad days. So when you look at like the tempo, right? So all those things break down. So in a game environment, things can tend to speed up, right? And you have multiple checkpoints to get to, and now as your foot is about to anchor into the ground, your hand's like, whoa, dude, we don't move at that tempo. Like, we're not that fast. And now it's disconnected, and now you're having to generate independent energy with your hand and your arm to get back into the slot. The tempo, I look at, this is a huge piece to my instruction, is looking at the tempo of your lead foot and the tempo of your hand, because these things have to match, right? Biomechanics, the way that we walk, right? This comes up as that comes down, okay? So if our tempo is thrown off, or if our hand path is disconnected and has like a bunch of pieces to get to, then it's going to be a lot harder for that individual to get into that slot, repeatable, consistent. Now, there's obviously the outliers that have been throwing a certain way for a number of years, that have trained their motor patterns and their motor skills to acquire that consistent and repeatable slot, even if their hand does all sorts of things. But if you're anything like me, things always change, whether we like it or not. Patterns get thrown into the mix even without trying, you know? So that's why I talk a lot about hand path simplicity, hand path connectivity. If we can just keep our hands somewhat connected as our body enters the drive phase, then it's going to give us a lot better opportunity to accomplish the goal of not only getting the hand up when the foot anchors down, but also being able to leverage the hand into the slot and utilize all of the energy that has been produced within the lower body mechanics. So that is my biggest piece of instruction when looking at hand path and arm action. Basically the simplicity of it, right? I talk about this a lot. You want to see the best throwers in the world, you look at shortstops in the 6-hole and right fielders throwing a guy out at home. You have a task, a time-sensitive task of, hey, I got to get rid of it quick, and I have to produce X amount of power output because it's bang, bang, and watch what the body does in order to accomplish that task. It's my whole thing with task-orientated throwing. All right, that's why I love like long toss, and the progressions and throw variations that I used are very similar to that of a shortstop, because I believe the body knows how to sequence in a specific environment that is time sensitive and task orientated. So, you know, for my young kids watching, you know, the best quote unquote drill you could do to obtain efficient mechanics, in my honest opinion, is roll a backhand to your freaking, or roll a ground ball to your backhand wherever you are, and try to complete that task, throwing it to first base in a time-sensitive manner and to accomplish high power output, or even roll a ground ball and throw someone out at home. And you train enough of that motor pattern, you're going to be in a good position. All right, so that's what I got. Hand path connectivity, hand path simplicity. Big piece. Again, I'm biased. It's saved my career, prolonged my career. I went from, you know, throwing 83 to 85, no joke, 2013, to being able to throw 95, upper 90s, touch 100. You know, all I credit to the hand path and the arm action. You know, it's not the biggest piece. Yeah, it probably is the biggest piece, but it's not the only piece. All right, I'm going to throw this little cheddar cheese here so you guys can watch. That hit the dude in the face.